Book 3 of my Firebrand series is coming along unbelievable. Like, I'm having so much fun writing this. I'm having so much fun getting into my characters, but I thought it'd be really kind of fun just to go all the way back to the beginning and just tell you guys, Firebrand never was meant to be a series. It was always meant to just be a standalone book, and the fact that it has progressed as far as it is now is just absolutely insane. So I just want to tell you guys a story. This is kind of the story of how I came about with my book and how I just started writing it. So if you're working on your own story and maybe you're thinking, is this even a good premise? If you're working on your own story and maybe you're not even sure where to start entirely, well, here's kind of where I did. So a long time ago, back when I was in college. Now, bear in mind, I started Firebrand about 10 years ago. This has been a long-going thing, and about 10 years ago, I was just working on something, and at the time, I was really big into gaming. So, I really love the MMO style, the massive multiplayer online role-playing games. I love the idea of taking a character and having that character progress, not just through a storyline, but also develop as a character to your own specific style. I love those kind of things. And one thing that a lot of people are into are the tabletop role-playing games, where you've got a group of people come together, and for some reason, they're just expected to work together. And I always thought, that always seems like the beginning of any kind of story, but that doesn't make any sense that it would be a particular beginning. It seems a lot more logical that after some point in their lives, they would all come together to do their thing, but the story takes place long before that. And so I thought, when I was trying to figure out what to do for my story, I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if we had that same kind of situation, but had the characters start off as essentially nobodies, and then they go off, they do their own thing, and then they come back together as that epic, awesome party, and then they have their big adventure there doing that. And so I thought, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. So I start going, and I just start writing, and I got a few pages in, I was like, man, this is crap. This is crap. And it was so frustrating because I thought, man, this is going to be so cool. This is going to be the coolest thing ever. And this is going to be the greatest thing since, Lord of the Rings. And I'm going to be the next Tolkien. And as you can tell, I had very, very reasonable expectations for myself as a writer. And not the case, unfortunately. So one of the things that I did was I just stopped. I just said, okay, this isn't working. I gotta stop and I gotta slow down. So one of the first things that I did after I got over that initial pain and tears and all that stuff was I just made a map. And I just started drawing out the map, and I just started physically drawing out the world and just figuring out what that even looked like, figuring out where things even were going to be, figured out what kind of place this even was going to be. And as I made the map, I started developing the history, and I started developing the setting that this was going to take place in. I started saying, hey, here I've got this location here. Is there a story that I want to see in this spot? I've got this location here. Is there a story I want to see here? How big do I want this thing to be? And then I just got that established, and then I figured out, all right, well, what kind of main character do I want them to be? Do I want them to be where do I even want them to, start off? What do I want it to be, a mainland story? Because it's amazing how many stories take place just in some long forgotten village, and that's where the great hero rises up from. It's like, okay, that's cool, that works, but I had a thing about the coastal city. I love, I live in Alaska, and we've got some of the best coastlines out there. Coastlines are crazy, just all the stuff going on with them. We've got beaches, we've got rocky, we've got cliffs, we've got everything. It's absolutely awesome. And so I really wanted to incorporate a lot of that stuff. And so then I thought, well, what if I just had a person that was on a coastal village, and that was part of his life. Okay, that'll work. That'll work. Well, now I need some kind of event that is going to jumpstart things, and so then I came up with the idea of Timothy. And so we're going, and I've got this idea, and I had a inspiration from the movie Captain's Courageous. It's a very cool old school movie. It's black and white, so like it's old school. And I had this really cool idea for it, but then as I went along, I thought, it'd be really cool if we have this really punk kid and this main character that work together. And yeah, then we'll see what happens with them. At some point, the main character should be thrown in jail because it kind of seems like that's a necessity for a lot of high fantasy stories. So yeah, if it's good enough for The Hobbit, then obviously it's good enough for my characters. So yeah, you had that. And then, okay, cool. So now they're going to go off and they're going to save the world. That's all fine and dandy. Well, when I was writing this story, I only had the ideas up to the point that was at this current part, like a couple chapters into book 2. So Firebrand Red Horizon is the first book. Firebrand Crimson Shore is the second book. And when I started writing this out, I only had an idea of what would happen up to basically getting into the city of Vandor. And after that, I had no idea. I had absolutely no clue, and I was just winging it completely. And this was terrifying because I like to have an ending in mind. Like, I like to think, what is the story going to actually do? What's going to come out of it? And I had no clue. I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen, and that was terrifying. But I had, at that point, enough of an idea, so I went through and I just started writing it. Well, then, as I went along, I started to develop some of the other characters. And so I finished up this main kind of story part, and then I got a little bit further, and I said, okay, cool, so he gets to the city, he does stuff there, and then he goes back to the other city. That's all fine. But it felt really incomplete. There were a lot of things that I thought just was not developed well, and there was just not enough info, and I really felt that I needed a lot more. But at that point, the book was already pretty big, and that was when I made the big decision that I was going to take my book, and not only was I going to expand it, and I was going to go even further, but then I was just going to cut it in half. And that was a big challenge, because then I had to figure out what is an actual good ending spot for my book. Now, for those of you who have read it, basically it's the point right after he kind of gets his crew established. He gets his kind of purpose as not just a captain in his village, but essentially a captain in the world. And he gets that kind of established as what his role is going to be for everything. And I felt that that was a good point. But then I want to talk about the character of Onesh. And Onesh is actually one of my favorite characters that I wrote. And when I had originally written the part that had Onesh and Mare in there, I wrote it as a side thing. Like, it was a standalone piece for a creative writing class. I had a really cool idea for my main book, and I thought this is all well and good, but at the same time, I was kind of thinking, man, it'd be cool if I could get into the world a little bit more, and not really sure how to do that. So then I wrote another separate piece that was supposed to be kind of a standalone short story, and I just wrote it with the mindset that this is going to be taking place beforehand. And I wrote this for my creative writing class, and they loved it. They absolutely loved the setting. They loved the character. They loved the way that he spoke, and that was incredibly encouraging. So I was then encouraged to put that as the beginning for my book. Well, then when it came to closing book 1, I really wanted to go back to those characters and bring that element back into it. So even though the first chapter and essentially the last part, they feel a little bit separate, they kind of bookend the overall story that's going on. Really is just an idea that, yeah, you've got this story taking place, but there's a much bigger world that's out there. And not gonna lie, I'm really excited for when all those stories come together. It's really, really cool. But yeah, so I had to figure that out. And with that, then I had to create another prologue or another intro part for book 2, and I was able to get into those characters a little bit more and explore those and really explore the mythos, and that was a lot of fun. But because I was splitting the book in 2, now I had more time to develop on some of my other characters, and this was one of my most enjoyable parts, because then I really got to develop certain characters like Genis, who was originally just kind of a wild character, just a out there sort of person. But through my other revisions, I realized what kind of person this guy was. I realized that there was a lot more depth to him that I could bring out. I developed the friendship between he and Josiah a lot better and really made them more brothers rather than just other individuals. So that was a whole lot of fun. And so when it came to just coming up with the story, so much of it was, this feels incomplete. What do I need to do to make it feel more complete? And as I started developing these characters, then that was where I started to develop the rest of the world. That was where I started to figure out what these characters are going to do, what these motivations behind why they're going to do what they're going to do. Because one thing that I've always hated this in books, in movies, but when a character does something because the author or because the writer or because of whoever need them to do that thing, but it's not something that they would do just by themselves. And it's like, it feels so forced, it feels so just impractical, and it really just takes me out of it and really makes me not invest in those characters. I've had that recently with a TV show that I've been watching. One character, she was set up as a love interest for another individual, but he never liked her, or he didn't like her in that way. He was getting kind of frustrated, and they're kind of bringing that character along. And then suddenly, she has a complete 180 about her views of other characters, and she's just a completely different person. It's like, man, this is so out of left field for you guys. Why are you doing this? And yeah, it was to essentially force a relationship to not happen, but at the same time, I'm a huge fan of letting things develop naturally. So, when I was writing mine, I really realized that I need this to feel organic. I need this to feel natural. And so then I dove into just figuring out how to make those characters stand out more as characters. Now, granted, I've got a lot of characters, and they constantly say when you're writing a book, don't have too many main characters, but here's my thing. When I first started writing this book, this was the idea. This was the thing that just felt right. And so that's what I pursued. Now, for other stories, when I look at other books that I'm working on right now, I keep them as more of a single character focus. It's a lot easier, not having too many perspectives going on. But with this one, there's just so much going on. There's just so much of the world that I want to be able to explore that I cannot do it with one single character. And there are so many facets to these nations, facets to this war that they're going to be engaged with, and it is impossible to tell all of it from one single character's perspective. So when you have people, you're going to be writing your story, and people are going to give opinions. People are going to have opinions. That's just a fact of life. Let them have opinions, accept the opinions, but also understand that at the end of the day, when you're writing, you have to write the story that you feel drawn to. You have to write the story that you feel called to. And with that, though, I would also encourage you to look at what people like, what people don't like, because if you have individuals that feel that they only want a single character perspective, multi-character perspective books are not going to be in their wheelhouse. And so they're going to have opinions that are not going to work for you. They're going to have opinions that do not work with your style of writing, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay. There is nothing wrong with them, and there is nothing wrong with you in writing like that. So when you're writing your books, just understand that you're also going to have people that are not going to like it, and they're going to think that things need to be changed. In my creative writing class, this was focused on science fiction and fantasy. So we're all fantasy lovers in this class. We all appreciate fantasy. Well, because at that time my book was taking place mostly at sea, one girl said, I don't like stories that take place at sea. And with that, I knew that there was no way that I was going to sell her on that point. If she wanted a story to not take place on the ocean, then I was not going to change that. That was such an integral part of my book. And so I knew immediately that, yes, while I want her to like it, I know that she's not going to relate it in the same way that someone else will. And that is perfectly okay. So when you're looking at your story, when you're writing your story, when you're done with your story, there are going to be people out there that don't like it. But if you write your story because you genuinely care about it, and if you write your story because you feel passionate about it, there are going to be other people out there. I don't have a huge following right now. I have a few people that have read my books. I suck at marketing. That's a reality. But people have read it. People like it. People have genuinely enjoyed my book. And I feel really good about that. Do I want more readers? Absolutely. Do I want to get my book all over the world? Absolutely. Do I want people to actually give comments about my book? Of course. As a writer, I would love for people, after they've read my book, to actually rate it or give it a review or both on whatever platform they bought it on, because that tells me, did I do something right? Did I do something not right? People buy the books, but if they don't do anything with it, I have no idea how they felt about it. So, I would love for people to give me comments. I would love for people to give me comments in this video. I would love for people to like my book. I would love for people to like my video. And naturally, if this is something that you enjoy, I'd also like you to subscribe to my channel, because then I get to talk about this stuff with you more. That's all cool. But in life, when you're working, when you're writing, when you're doing any kind of artistic thing, there are going to be people that enjoy it and people that don't. So I'm at that point right now where I've had a fairly long break. I have come through and I'm finally working again on book 3 after getting book 1 and 2 done. Spent a fair amount of time trying to push out the couple of them, and that's resulted in me not working on book 3. But I just thought, you know what? I got this book. I got a plan, and so I am really, really excited. For those of you who have read book 1 and 2, here are a couple spoilers for you. If you haven't and you don't mind spoilers, that's cool. But book 3 is really going to be seeing a lot of what happens after the crew got dropped off in Vandor. So we're going to see a lot of really cool stuff happening with Seth. We are going to see a lot of really cool stuff happening with Victorious and Andreas. We're going to see some of their really awesome interactions with Jolnar. I love that guy. I love that dwarf. He's so awesome. We're going to see a lot of really cool stuff happening with David and his brothers. They've got some really awesome adventures on the horizon. Silas, oh man, things are going to get interesting with him. And Paul, there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff between those two, and that dynamic is going on there. And naturally, we are going to see stuff with Josiah afterwards. But yeah, I am so excited with what is going to be happening with book 3. I am really excited for you all to be able to read it. And hopefully you guys check back in. I'll give some more updates later on. Otherwise, thanks for sitting down. And yeah, thanks for chatting.